Hi, it was very interesting to hear all of the developments that are going on and to look at the maps that were put up on the screen in the various presentations, showing the distribution of uptake in different parts of the world. And my question is about traditional banking. I believe has failed many people in so many communities globally who are unbanked. How do you see and what do you think you need to help democratize finance in that sense and make sure that those in difficult to reach areas of the world who haven't had access to financial services traditionally can have access in the future and make sure that this sector helps support the UN sustainability goals?
Can I answer first? So last time I checked, there were actually 30% more blockchain users in Africa than Europe when I checked last time. And as I mentioned, some of the reasons that they have, well, sometimes not a reliable state, and then high inflation, and the money export controls. So even if people want to buy dollars, they're not allowed. So that itself, like, yeah, then the crypto infrastructure provides like basic security for many people in Africa. So that's like the base layer, and then now more recently, then we have also things like decentralized identity. So they have like not only the ability, someone else mentioned identity in the presentation, not only ability to do those transactions, but also then like prove I am this person, can maybe like vote and get a certificate and do other things as well to do with finance. So using mostly blockchain first, and then adding decentralized identity for that, we can start like to rebuilding much functionality that we have in like in the legacy role.
When I joined this ecosystem in 2013, this is what it was about. It was about banking the unbanked. This is dead. People do not care about banking the unbanked in this industry by and large. And that is making me very sad, but that is the truth. It still happens, as Maciej kind of nicely explained, because people are using USDT on Tron, for example, indeed in Southeast Asia, in South America, in sub-Saharan Africa. That does happen, not by intent, but because we do build accidentally permissionless technology. So by building permissionless technology, even though there is no business interest in banking any unbanked, permissionless technologies does bank the unbanked, and it does happen. It happens slowly. It happens. I start seeing it. I also I think Vitalik was writing about that. People are using, Binance as a settlement layer. That's very sad because, well, earlier or later, every centralized venue will get hacked, right? That's one of the kind of central forces of the universe. So again, I do think it does happen, even though there is no business intent behind unbanking or banking the unbanked. And I do hope that people continue building permissionless technologies to actually help humans. So that's my hope in this.
I'm going to be a bit more controversial and say I disagree with the ecosystem doesn't care about banking the unbanked. I think that there's enough OGs in the space that still care about it. And, definitely with MetaMask, that has been one of our sort of primary drivers, and we have huge, hundreds of millions of users who are in emerging markets who quite often don't have access to banks, basically because they can't prove their addresses. And they get access to some basic financial services via stablecoins. I think I agree with Sebastian that in a lot of these areas, they're not interested in Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana or whatever. They're just interested in the US dollar and protecting themselves from devaluing lira, naira, Argentinian peso, whatever it is. Funnily enough, actually, when I moved here a couple of weeks ago, I went down to Sports Center and bumped into a guy from Venezuela, and we got chatting, and he works in the fintech space. And he asked me what I did, and I was just like, oh, how do I explain this? And I then sort of just murmured sort of crypto, and he's like, oh yeah, I know. And then he said, what do you do exactly? And I mentioned MetaMask because that's the easiest thing to explain. And he said, oh yeah, I just used MetaMask for the last couple of years, sending remittances back to my mum in Venezuela. And he said, I don't do it so often now because actually the banking system in Venezuela has got a little bit easier to interact with. But at the time, he said it was like the only way I could get money to her. And so I think there are real world remittance use cases. I agree it's a shame that some of this stuff's happening on Binance Smart Chain or BNB, on Tron as well. These networks are not decentralized. But I think that over time, the center of gravity will move towards the decentralized networks and with the highest security, and those will endure. So I'm more bullish about the fact that I think there's still an underlying ethos in the ecosystem. Those people haven't gone away. Yes, there's a lot more noise around institutional stuff and the ETFs, and when you sign up for one of our cards, you have to KYC, right? And that doesn't help people who are unbanked necessarily, but it still brings assets, it brings liquidity, it brings services and investment into the space to allow for those use cases. And I'm seeing, there's like this thing called Yellow Card, which has been a huge success across Africa, allowing for low-cost remittances using blockchain networks. And there's a recent Nigerian VC fund that also created a unicorn. So there is really interesting stuff happening, and it's not just Africa. It's like across Southeast Asia, South America, Central America. There's just a ton of stuff happening in the background, and I'm quite bullish about it.
A little bit. So we're a global first company, which means much of our roadmap for next year is internationalization. Pretty much any mobile phone in any country will be able to download our product. And part of that is that the actual app download is very small. So if you go to developing countries, they use a lot of super apps, which isn't a trend we have really in Europe or America. And that's because they can't afford to download a whole bunch of stuff on their phone for either data reasons or storage reasons. So we're very committed to banking the unbanked, and it's something that's very exciting.
Hi, I found those presentations really interesting, so thank you. I had a question about valuation. If I look at most DeFi protocols have lost a lot of valuation compared to Bitcoin and USD over the last 4 or 5 years. And I see like there's a lot of meme coins coming up that have got crazy valuations. I was wondering, how does that affect you guys in terms of viability, in terms of attracting staff? Do you see signs of that turning around? It just seems that some really promising projects with great ideas aren't really getting the recognition that I think they deserve. So I was wondering your sort of views on that.
I'll kick off. None of this is financial advice. I think that you've got to treat like tokens, maybe outside of 3 or 4, as like high risk sort of angel or VC investments, right? And in the VC world, you'll be lucky if 1 in 20 succeed, right? And I think in the angel space, it's more like 1 in 100. So I think you've got to assume that if you think you can pick that 1 in 100, good luck to you. But a lot of these coins are going to struggle, right? And my view is, I think over time, I think fees are really important, and I see, certain protocols generating fees, and then some of those protocols return those fees to the token. I think those become valuable, but at the end of the day, it's still a tiny market compared to traditional finance and real estate and the stock markets and so on. It's highly volatile, and it's completely unregulated. And so, it's just like probably the most extreme high risk space. You can get and we are always going to be subject. And because it's decentralized, there is no ability to bail out failing projects or whatever. So it is going to be highly cyclical, and there'll be booms and busts.
Sorry, I just thought of something. I think a great remedy against hype is crypto economics. The basic people should never ever invest just based on hype or so. Even though one could say that meme coins is a way is tokenizing lottery. I mean, like, so is lottery bad? I don't know. But if we maybe like we move it to the blockchain, well, it's still some form of lottery. Some people win, some people lose. But I think actually it's the like weakness in the crypto economics, and that's why we have a talk in the afternoon, probably Ben, about just this thing, because if some protocols they make money if the market goes up. Some have like optimistic wishful thinking. If you scrutinize the white paper of crypto economics, they're actually not like, yes, if the market goes up, they will make money. If the market goes down, some projects might just die just because. So I would say they have like sometimes poor, like not robust crypto economics, and just like assume that, okay, the market is going to go up. And yeah, I would say that sometimes some have poor fundamentals. And I think that's my point of view.
I think if you ask ChatGPT or Google to explain to you a summary of a paper that was published by Fidelity Digital Assets called Bitcoin First, or Bitcoin First Revisited as it was updated, I think it explains why Bitcoin is separate from a lot of other crypto projects. And it's essentially down to a monetary technology that's superior to crypto or fiat. So for me, if that's a good gateway to understanding this sort of conversation.
Coming back to the meme coins, I guess it's, I think, psychologically important to zoom out and ignore. If you want to move forward and keep your sanity and do anything, just ignore everything that's going on that has a price ticker, because otherwise you won't get to do anything. That being said, people like Ponzi's, right? The human mind loves Ponzi. Everyone loves Ponzi's. Laws are not going to stop us because we build decentralized technologies. At Gnosis, we want to lean into that in a bit a sane way. There is a monetary experiment going on at Gnosis that is called Circles, which tries to combine universal basic income with cash money that is spendable. In fact, if you go to the app that I showed before, it's kind of gated by that network. So ultimately, the idea is everybody can, mint their own token, but, try to bring that token into circulation in a way that at least the Ponzi is not as harmful to the people as what we currently see on Pump.Fun, on, some presidentially endorsed billion-dollar Ponzi schemes. So, yeah, I mean, admitting that the people like Ponzi, Gnosis is leaning into that with a monetary experiment that is going on in a bit a healthy way. I do appreciate monetary experimentation. I wish there was more. I wish it was not just literal like one-on-one Ponzi's. And I do hope that people contribute to a more intellectual discourse on how monetary experiments could be, getting us out of a US dollar, world that we have, because I do not think it helps the UK or any other sovereign country to basically just run on USDC or USDT.
Okay, final question before we go to lunch. Final one.
Hello, thanks. So I'm Prakash, and I have one question from, I think, basically from Gnosis Safe and MetaMask. So I'm a big fan of both the products. See, you have told about the banks, and everybody is having interest on stablecoin now. So they will hog onto the space. Do you see the decentralization of the system in risk now, because they will have more controls, more stake, and also they will customize their smart contracts to do more controls based on regulations and stuffs around. So what's your take on that? Like, how are you going to tread with this risk? I think.
Go on.
I'll try. I think counterintuitively, I think brand plays a huge role in how humans interact with things. So whether something is decentralized or centralized, I think it's valuable to have a brand that people can trust for a lot of components that might not be on chain. So yeah, I think that's the only thing I would say.
I think that it's still very complicated to set up an EOA wallet, and self-custodying even Bitcoin or Ethereum is a high-risk thing that I wouldn't expect, 80% of the population to be able to do. I just think there's just so much complexity and risk in making mistakes, losing secrets, being dusted and transferring to the wrong address, et cetera, et cetera. And, we've seen even like the biggest players in the space make mistakes and get like really badly hacked. So I do think the banks will have a part to play. I'm hopeful that through stablecoins, it will drive a huge amount of innovation, so that new fintechs will be able to emerge to compete with banks, and it will force banks to innovate themselves and reduce their fees. I think that's what I'm hoping for. There is a risk of re-centralization, but I don't think it's like we are seeing some re-centralization of Bitcoin in the ETFs, but I still think that the sort of decentralized principles remains, and I think that those networks will retain their sort of they're fundamentally built as decentralized entities, and there's enough good actors around that will want to keep that decentralized principle alive.
I was very concerned about these points as well that you mentioned, right? Like that you have an issuer, which is a centralized institution, which wants or needs by necessity to be in control. Like looking at what we did in Switzerland, I was involved in like at least half a dozen real estate projects, tokenized real estate, like several like stable coins that were launching. And I was like back then trying to convince those folks, no, don't build in a whitelist, and you can only transfer to allow listed accounts and stuff. I've also seen this unfortunate era of, blockchain, not Bitcoin, Bitcoin, not blockchain, and kind of private blockchain and so on. Now I'm much more chill because I've seen all of this go absolutely nowhere. Like all of this go absolutely nowhere, and it's somehow a self-correcting process where all these attempts where you try to launch a project that is fully in control, like it just doesn't go anywhere. Like I showed some DeFi building blocks, and it's just so incredibly powerful that you take your stable token, which is unpermissioned largely, right? It can be seized, right? So, but still being able to take that into LP, that into anywhere, and take the LP tokens, deposit it into Aave and leverage that and so on. Like that is so powerful that all these like very controlled mechanisms, they're just not going to go anywhere. And that makes me hopeful that we're not going to see too much capture. Of course, there is some capture possible with blacklisting of Tether and USDC, but I think once that gets too out of control, like more people will move out of it. So I think also that is somewhat self-correcting.
Yeah, I just think that because these are permissionless networks, if there's something that is restricting, as Sebastian said, if there's something that's restricting or being sort of prohibited, people find a way around it. Like you can't get access to dollars in Argentina. You go on Tron and you can find a money exchanger to exchange dollars to Tether, for example. There's always a way around this stuff. And previously people used black market fiat. Nowadays there'll always be a new stable coin that will provide a service to people who need it.
Right, we're now going to have a lunch break.